of change in the travel industry is now unprecedented. The explosion of social content, new devices, new distribution channels have changed dramatically the expectations of the new travelers. Phocuswright is the leading authority in the travel research space, and we deliver our findings every year through our two events, the Global Phocuswright Conference in the US and the European Phocuswright event in Dublin in May, which will take place from the 12th to the 14th of May 2015. The new travel leaders must understand their segment, but they must not guess. They must be knowledgeable, insightful, and now connected. They must understand their competition, but also anticipate disruptive new travel trends. So let's take a look at the online travel penetration by region. This year, Europe matched the online travel penetration with the US, and will even surpass that figure with the years coming ahead. Latin America, Asia Pacific show a growth much stronger. However, those markets are still lagging and are still behind Europe and the US, where we were a couple of years ago. In Europe, Germany and the UK are the engines of growth. In Spain, we have seen signs of a strong recovery coming ahead. Italy and France are more lagging now and have shown flat results, or in certain cases, even decline. So now if we take a look at the Spanish travel market and its online growth rates, as you can see, the online travel penetrations have jumped from 33% and will reach 39% in 2016. The total travel market has grown by 5% in 2013 and another 6% in 2014, reaching now 22.6 billion euros, with our expectations for this year coming along. In regards to the OTAs, they've jumped with a growth of 14% between 2013 and 2014, after watching 2 years of very slow growth on the market. That's thanks to OTAs, thanks to mobile shares rising, thanks to a recession that has had an impact on the OTAs, helping them to gain more consumers shopping around much more than before. Now, if you look at the OTA's market share in Spain, like on the other European markets, Booking is by far the leaders. If we look at gross bookings, Booking owns 51% of the market shares. Just behind Bookings, Odigeo, Bravofly with the Roomba Group, and Logi Travel with each 8% of the market shares. As I just mentioned, OTAs benefited from the recession, attracting more travelers who are shopping around. However, those same travelers are shopping around the OTAs, but more and more booking through the suppliers' direct sites, who are becoming much more aggressive those days with mobile applications, but also airlines, for example, lowering their commission rate. So all those had an impact on their market shares. OTAs like Odigeo's, for example, are much more at risk because their business model is still based on airlines distribution. So when you look at the Spanish online travel market in regards to OTAs, for 2016, the suppliers' direct shares are representing now 54% compared to 52% today. That has increased because all those suppliers, as I just said, are becoming much more aggressive on the market. So the Spanish travel market today, that's in a nutshell what it represents. This research is part of a much, much larger project that we publish every year that is called the European Online Travel Overview, where we look at each of the key European markets, UK, Germany, Spain, France, Scandinavia, and Italy, and where we report our findings, the trends on each of those markets, and the market shares online versus offline. So some of the key findings will be that the Spanish travel market will reach 24 billion euros in 2016. So we're definitely showing signs of rebound in the economy in Spain, which obviously has an impact on the travel industry. Online distribution channels, both web and mobile, are growing at the expense of the offline channel. In 2013, a third of all travel bookings were made online, and this will climb to 39% in 2016. The low-cost market is growing much faster than any other segment in Spain. Hotel gross bookings totaled 12.2 billion euros in 2014, the country's largest travel segment. Hotel transactions represent 30% of all online supplier direct bookings in Spain. Mobile is becoming more and more important for all suppliers across the market and accounted for 8% of online travel bookings in 2014. This percentage will double within the next 2 years. Spain hotel bookings grew by 3% in 2013, and we expect a growth of another 4% in 2014 numbers. Booking.com will only continue to gain shares and still benefit from a very fragmented market. So that was a very quick snapshot of the Spanish online travel market today. This was an introduction to a largest piece of research that we are going to publish this week, which is called the Spain's Rising Class of Tech-Savvy Hotel Chains, and that we are publishing for Fitur in partnership with ITH. So I will now introduce you to Luke Bujarski, our Director of Research, who will present you the key findings of this paper. This white paper is free and is available for you after this presentation. You can come and get the link from us, and you can download it, as I said, for free, or buy the full report if you're interested in the findings. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Can you hear me okay? Oh, excellent. Buenos días, buenas tardes. Pues, iba a hacer esto en español, pero solo me falta 30 minutos, algo así. Entonces, mejor que lo hacemos en inglés, creo. Pero, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here today. Very excited to present some of the key findings of some very recent research that we've conducted on the Spanish hotel segment in particular. As you know, the Spanish travel market is in a bit of a rebound, right? As Florence had pointed out, as our research shows, the Spanish market is growing, but also the landscape in terms of online distribution, marketing, technology that's being implemented in hotels is changing at a much faster rate than the hotel market is growing. So at Phocuswright, when we catch on to trends, what we like to do is channel in on particular segments of a given market. And in this case, we wanted to focus on Spain, but a very particular segment of the Spanish hotel market, namely brands like Roommate Hotels, Vinci Hotels, Bed for You. These hotels are what we considered very unique in the market, and we'll explain to you why as the presentation goes on. But really, more than anything, this research that we conducted is really in response to the changes in how people are shopping for travel and really where people are staying, right? And how hotels are really dealing with these huge changes that we're seeing in terms of social media and its impact on influencing the customer when shopping for travel. Things like buzzwords like last-minute bookings, the millennial traveler, right? The bleisure traveler, right? How many of you are going to take a couple of days in Madrid to go shopping this weekend? Anybody? No? All right. See? So, you know, but ultimately, where are you going to stay, right? I mean, there's the classic hotel, but there are also disruptive models like Airbnb, you know, boutique hotels that are pulling business away from the traditional hotel model, right? So all these things are probably pretty familiar to you. So what we wanted to do is ultimately investigate how this kind of unique brand of hotel, unique type of hotel here in Spain, namely what we call the digital natives, right, of Spain. These hotels are part of a study that we did that ultimately focused on brands that are less than 10 years old, that were essentially born in the age of the internet, right? That don't have a lot of the baggage in terms of best practices and partnerships that might impact their ability to implement technology from a sales and distribution perspective. So we administered a survey in October of last year, focused on 15 brands in Spain, representing over 130 properties, primarily focused on the business traveler, largely in part due to the fluctuations in the economy that they've been experiencing. So there's a unique angle that these hotels have really had to take to really attract their core clientele, right? So we found some really interesting findings that I'd love to share with you today. And here's some of the themes that we looked at, things that you're definitely familiar. Online versus online bookings, right? Offline versus online bookings. Direct versus indirect sales. Shopping and buying and how hotels are differentiating between these two in terms of marketing strategy and booking strategy. The list goes on. And really, it's been a great experience to see what these hotels are doing. But in our research, really what we wanted to do is ask some core questions about the accommodation sector in general, and to really use this as a case study for hotels globally, right? And some of these fundamental questions that we asked are things like, what is a web-savvy hotel, right? What defines a good online sales distribution strategy for a hotel? So question number one, web savvy, is it synonymous with online bookings, right? So if you think you're a good, if you have a good online strategy, is that synonymous with online bookings? So here we're ultimately talking about customer acquisition, right? And whether or not a hotel prefers traditional channels, i.e. telephone, email, or even traditional travel agents and tour operators versus digital channels, OTAs, websites, right? And what we found within this particular group of hotels is that, in fact, online bookings do capture a large portion of those bookings, right? 59% come from these online channels. And when you look at supplier direct versus OTA, this number is 49%, on top of traditional things like GDS, right? 49% OTA, supplier website. That's about 10% higher than the European average, or more like, let's say, 14%. On average, Europeans, let's say the typical European hotel gets about 33% of their bookings from OTA and web channels. Here we have a group of hotels that gets about 49% from supplier direct and OTA channels. So in fact, this group of hotels does capture a lot from online, but at the same time, offline continues to be a very influential portion of that. So we also wanted to look at which channels grew the most in 2014 and how these hotels are going to prioritize their investments when it comes to sales channels and how they're going to market these channels. And we see that while direct web was the number one priority in 2000, or grew the fastest in 2014, second to OTA, OTAs being second fastest. What we see in 2015 is that the priority falls not on online, but direct sales, right? Telephone and email were a bigger priority for hotels, for this particular group of hotels, than online bookings, right? Maybe that might not come as a surprise for you, but it's good to see what this particular group of hotels is thinking when it comes to overall strategy and priorities. Another question, is web savvy synonymous with direct sales, right? There's a lot of hype about the internet and how true or false, whether or not it's true is to be questioned, but the internet and online being able to free hotels from their third-party distribution partners. So let's see what that looks like. This particular group, we saw that indirect sales, in fact, still captured a large portion of reservations, 60%, versus 40% direct, right? At the same time, there were extremes in this distribution kind of spectrum, right? Where you have brands that might get 60% of their hotel bookings by telephone and email. Others might get 6%. OTAs in certain instances captured 60% of reservations for certain brands while capturing only 20% for others. One interesting thing, and this is very much an exception to across the board, but certain brands had a lot more luck with mobile apps than did other hotels. So 7% from mobile app, that's pretty high, right? Most brands were pretty much nil at that point. So we ask ourselves, looking at mobile, right? I mean, everybody's talking about mobile. Everybody here has a smartphone, obviously. You probably booked your hotel on your smartphone these days. So we wanted to see what these web-savvy hotels are doing when it comes to the mobile environment and how they're integrating their presence on this particular format. And a big question is whether or not they want to create an app, right? That's always a big question. It's always a big question for hotels, whether or not to go to app or mobile web or both. So here's some data that we discovered on this particular issue. So it looks like most brands have a fairly well integrated, or at least are attempting to make a strong effort in the mobile environment, right? 70% or 7 out of the 15 brands have a responsive design website, while 5 opted for a mobile web, right? So if you don't know the difference, obviously, a responsive design is something that fits, that automatically adjusts depending on the format that you're working with. But here we see that hotels have different approaches when it comes to mobile web, right? So there's still no kind of consensus when it comes to mobile. Not surprisingly, still a relatively new format. In fact, by 2016, overall in Europe, online bookings and travel will probably reach about 25. We estimate will reach about 25%, and that's probably a conservative estimate considering how things are moving along. So when it comes to technology, we looked at Wi-Fi and whether or not these hotels largely look at it as a service, a complimentary service that they offer their guests, or whether or not they look at it as a revenue generator, right? And here's the result. So the majority of these brands, 13 out of 15, offer complimentary Wi-Fi service, while others offer a kind of a mix of both, complimentary combined with MiFi, right? MiFi services. Does anybody have a MiFi device in the audience? Right, so very useful tool. I have one. Try not to keep it too close to myself, right? Maybe in my bag or something. You never know. But nevertheless, a very useful tool for your guests to have that experience on site, but also as they explore Madrid or they explore London, as they travel for business. They have that connectivity, that around-the-clock connectivity associated with that brand, right? And obviously, a lot of the bigger, there are cases where a lot of the bigger brands are really struggling with this right now, since it is really a revenue generator for a lot of the big traditional brands. So some interesting trends in marketing. We see that social networks, by and large, are embraced by the majority, by far the majority, really leveraging social media as a way to connect with their core customer base, really as a way to strengthen their overall online presence is widely practiced. So is online reputation, right? Really getting a good sense of what people are looking at when it comes to their profile, whether it be on social media, travel review sites like TripAdvisor, blogs, all this stuff, these hotels are doing, they're on top of it, they're on their game, they're well aware of these things. But there's some other cool things happening right now in the space of content marketing, particularly in video, right? Hotels are really pushing, they're really looking for a way to engage their audience via video, and more via technology like proximity marketing, beacons, right? Looking to engage that customer even more on site via this particular technology. So here we have another perspective on the tools that these hotels are using to generate direct sales, right? And I was actually talking with a colleague right before the presentation, and she was telling me that a lot of her sales are actually driven via Facebook. So she gets a lot of requests via Facebook, but then she has to in turn go and process those reservations, send those reservations over to the reservation desk. There's a lot of interesting ways that these different media can really capture an audience. Social media obviously very strong in that context. Content marketing, it seems as though either hotels do it or they don't, right? It's kind of an all or nothing game when it comes to content marketing. And probably, it's a conscious effort, certain, even though this group of hotels has similarities, each of them really have different strategies and different, essentially different core clientele that they might be trying to reach. One thing that we found very interesting was that certain number of these brands. Just continue on. So a number of these brands are getting not tired, but maybe somewhat weary of the traditional search engine marketing, search engine optimization type marketing strategies that may or may not be getting more expensive in certain markets, looking at other channels like social media, meta search to really build more traffic to their websites and ultimately building their online presence, right? Let's take a quick look back at distribution, ultimately, what they're doing to really find a balance, because if there's one theme that keeps reoccurring in this data is that there really is no one-size-fits-all strategy when it comes to distribution, right? It's really depends on the type of brand that you have, the clientele that you're really ultimately looking to target. And we see that because there's a huge variety in terms of the overall distribution footprint that we see across these brands. 35% OTA, 24% by telephone and email, direct web 14% overall. And again, these are averages, right? There are obviously differences among these brands. But when it comes to costs, this might be a kind of a familiar scenario for those of you that are working day to day in hotel marketing, where you try to improve, grow certain sales channels. You're ultimately pushing, it can in a way push certain costs around, right? So implementing supplier direct marketing costs money, right? Where OTAs, in a way, kind of do that for you, right? So we wanted to see if we could capture certain patterns within this group of hotels by looking at the 5 brands that had the highest amount of direct sales, and we compared those to the 5 brands that had the lowest direct sales to see if there were any patterns that emerged. And actually we did, and it's interesting to see how that may or may not impact costs, right? Because here we see, so in yellow we have brands with high direct sales. And these brands, our data show that, in fact, the more effort you put into direct marketing, the more direct sales you will get, right? But through what channels will those sales come through? Here we see that the yellow brands, the ones that put a big effort into direct marketing, got way more bookings through traditional channels, phone and email, namely, right? So you have to consider cost benefit here in terms of direct and indirect costs and how that might impact your business, right? On the other hand, where we have brands with that are more third-party dependent, the purple brands, we see that OTAs, there's a much smaller share of email bookings, so that there's the variation. I think to make a long story short here, we see that, yeah, direct sales are great, but they cost money and they require a lot of effort, right? Whether or not they're, and here's some, here's another data point that points to this aspect. Those brands that were third-party dependent averaged about 75% third-party, right? But while you look at the brands that have among the highest direct sales, there's still a very equal balance between direct and indirect, right? So they're really pushing. They're making a big effort to capture that 41% of direct sales, a bigger effort, right, to capture those sales. So, it's a balancing act, clearly. So what are the implications for other markets, right? Ultimately, what we want to do is take this information and use it as a benchmark, as a case study for hotels everywhere, not just Spain. And one of the regions we recently looked at is the Latin American market. In November, we published a very big comprehensive report on Latin America across 6 different markets, 6 different segments, and we see ultimately this is what the market looks like in terms of size, right? We have clearly Brazil is the biggest travel market, while Mexico is second biggest. But when we look at hotels, we see that Mexico, in fact, has much larger bookings than Brazil. So, that's an interesting case for, whether it be the brands that we investigated or for other hotel brands, what the similarities are between Mexico and Spain, since, well, both have, kind of these 2 dual markets, right? You have sol y playa, you have a beach and sun, and you have the urban hotels, right? You have the urban hotels that really mainly cater to the business class, to the business traveler, to the domestic market. And we see in Mexico that interior cities actually comprise a larger portion of hotel sales. So what are those hotels doing in that market? What are they doing differently in that market that may, and what are the comparisons in terms of, marketing, sales, and technology strategy in Spain versus a market like Mexico? And here we have a typical breakout in terms of distribution across the digital natives, the hotels that we ultimately surveyed. Mexico, a typical hotel in Mexico, and a typical hotel in Spain in terms of distribution, right? So clearly a big difference in how, and so I think that there's a lot to learn across different markets, and that's pretty much it. So just to kind of summarize some conclusions, tech savvy may not always be synonymous with direct digital sales, right? It's ultimately building that brand presence, being there for the customer, having that information available to really drive sales, but not necessarily web sales. Mobile web, perhaps better for acquisition. Mobile apps, better for loyalty, perhaps, at least for now, right? Maybe the market, maybe the landscape will change at some point. Third party, not all bad. There's this war, right, direct against the war being waged against the OTA. But remember, there are more and more intermediaries coming on the market by the day, right? Amazon is stepping in right now to offer travel sales. Google is stepping up its game to offer travel sales. So what does all this mean for the hotel, right? I think, it may be worth keeping an open mind when it comes to longer-term strategy, distribution strategy for hotels and what their perceptions are, the relationships are with intermediaries. And again, just to kind of drive it home, is there a definitive one-size-fits-all strategy for accommodations in general? Probably not. So those are just some conclusions, and I'm going to hand it back over to Florence. No? Oh, well.
No, it was basically just to say, to repeat what we say in the beginning. If you want a copy of the white paper, you can just come and see us. We'll provide you the link, and you can download the paper anytime you want. If you have any questions.
Thank you.